Welcome to the show, where we explore God, life, the afterlife, spirituality, and the perplexities of the human experience from a Swedenborgian perspective. This is Big Spiritual Questions. In this episode, we asked, does every action have a moral significance?
So there is good and there is evil, and the space between what is good and what is evil is immeasurable. I like to think that the world is absolutely black and white. But if you were to take all the little tiny pieces of black and white and mix them all up and put them on a table and look at it, it would look gray. In that sense, things are black and white. It's just that we can't really see it.
So as I understand the concept of good and evil, in the Lord's eyes, there is a great gulf between heaven and hell. And in the Lord's eyes, obviously, there is no blurring, no grayness between what's good and evil. But I do think in human terms that there's always going to be a gradient. There's always going to be some of each. Swedenborg even mentions that in heaven, angels aren't even pure. So there's always something of self, something that isn't fully divine inside of us that way.
And I think so much of it is just remembering it. There's so very little in life that is absolutely purely one way. I think about Thich Nhat Hanh's famous example, and he said, you got a choice about how you want to grow life. And he said, if I gave you, a cup with rubbing alcohol, or a cup with muck, that's what he called muck, which one would you plant a seed in? And I think for a lot of people, they think rubbing alcohol is the way to go. And that's the complete binary decision, because nothing is ever that completely clean, that completely pure, because if it is, it's sterile. Nothing grows out of it. But it's through these other pieces that things do grow, and that's where we get to just trust in God's economy that really nothing's ever wasted.
If you want to know whether an action is good or evil, I don't mean to be irritating, but the answer is both, all of it, all the time. When we think of how we live our life and the behavior we have, the doctrines offer this thing called the composite model of discrete degrees. It's a long technical term, but it boils down to this. Every time we do something, whether it's wave hi to your mom, or watch somebody cut you off in traffic, or go check your email, that simple action has hundreds, if not thousands, of thoughts that build into that action. And each of those thoughts has hundreds, if not thousands, of tiny affections and desires that prompted us to do that. So all of this builds into the simple action of waving. We just kind of pretend we know why we did it. There are so many desires, each like somebody shouting for attention that we can't even hear. So I guess the bad news is, every time you do anything, it's probably got some good motivation, it's probably got some bad motivation, and you really can't know which is which. In some theoretical sense, if everything's a moral decision, sure, but we don't have the powers of attention to live life that way. So if that's the bad news, the good news is you don't have to worry about that. The Lord has asked you to find yourself a moral code, bend to it, reform yourself, try and do less evil than you did the day before, and don't worry about the motivations. That's sort of beyond your pay grade. It's huge, it's invisible, it's complicated, it's beyond us. Instead, watch your world, see if you're being mean to people, doing bad stuff, and do less of it tomorrow.
In other words, we can have a sort of a pseudo-conscience that tells us that we should worry about all these little choices that we're making, not really particularly based on anything except for anxiety and worry. I think we see a lot of examples of that in the world. And the teachings for the New Church say one of the things that lies before us in our spiritual path is learning to weed out that stuff, because that doesn't help us grow spiritually. Jesus says, do not worry, and in fact this is a command that he gives us over and over again, and I think the reason is that he knows we're going to worry. This is just what we default to, and spiritual life is not about worrying if we're good enough. Spiritual life is about looking for the places where we're bringing harm into the world, and without worry, without anxiety, working on changing those things.
I love dumb movie quotes. One of my favorite quotes is at the end of the movie Time Bandits, which is a stupid movie. But the parents are looking at what caused a house fire, and they're reaching inside an oven, and it is the source of all evil is in the oven. And the kid says, "Don't touch it, it's evil." The parents look at the kid, touch it, and they blow up. And that's how the movie ends. There are not things that are evil. Like, if you touch them, they're evil. Just like there aren't things that are good. Things are things. They are neutral. So it's important to know that it's not so much that there are gradations. There are evil things, there are good things, and then there are things that are not good or evil. They are distinctly a third category, which is neutral.
Yeah, I would say that on the grand scheme of things, when we're looking at real spiritual principles and spiritual loves, in the Lord's eyes, again, there's a black and white. But I mean, a lot of times you just have situations in the world where it's just a choice. It's not really coming from heaven or hell. It's just a lot more neutral. And so, something as simple as what you can eat for dinner, obviously, isn't a spiritual choice. It's a natural, it's a physical choice. So, and I do think sometimes we try to turn those lower level choices into matters of, spirituality and life and death and heaven and hell. And so I'm definitely one who thinks we should, probably chill on some of that stuff a little bit and really reserve the big judgments for the big things and allow a little bit of leeway in a lot of things.
I want to say for, sticklers, this distinction is not always 100% consistent, but I think it is a useful distinction when it is made, and it's a distinction between evil and sin. Evil is anything really that is harmful in the world, in ourselves. Sin is the evil that we consciously choose and are accountable for. It rises to the level of sin when we choose it knowing that it is harmful, knowing that it's evil. And so a lot of our choices don't rise to that level. I can still make a choice that will bring evil into the world, and it might not be sinful if I didn't consciously choose it knowing the evil that it was going to bring into the world. It's a little abstract, but I think that's a useful distinction.
So some important ideas to get out there. First of all, when you die, it's not like your book is added up and now you have to be punished for all the things that you weren't punished for before. The book Heaven and Hell is really clear. That doesn't happen. But another idea is that evil has its punishment wrapped up in it. And we actually see this in the world. If you live a life of deceit, it's a tangled web, and pretty soon people don't trust you, and you're trying to keep track of your lies, and you don't trust other people. And being a deceitful person makes you miserable regardless of whether you're caught or not. So I think it's important to discard that external idea that somebody's watching me and they're going to bust me for what I did. I consider that kind of a childish point of view. Rather than see it as a law enforcement system where somebody might catch you, it's almost like spiritual laws of physics, where, for everything there's an equal and opposite reaction. Or if you engage in lying, it has its misery built into it. So it's not really a matter of guilt. It's a matter of becoming somebody who is a vessel for what is good and true, or deciding to feed that which makes you miserable, which makes you more miserable.
There are so many things in this life that we can't control, that aren't ours, that aren't our responsibility, that become our problem, but they're not actually our fault. And so when I think about what the Lord is looking at in a person's life, the Lord is looking at how we're responding to those challenges that show up. The Lord's looking at how we use what we know and those choices that we make freely. And there are a lot of times in life where we get backed into corners, where we don't have the greatest perspective on what's going to happen, what the fallout will be, where we don't have the greatest freedom even, where we feel like we're very much constrained. The Lord looks at how we're doing our best in those times. And so thinking about what is good and what is evil, and is it black and is it white, and can you ever point to a person in this life and say, that's a good person? I don't think you can. Because we are this complicated mix of motives. We're this complicated mix of ideas, some of them good and some of them bad. And when the Lord looks at us, he's really almost taking a snapshot and asking, what were they doing with what they knew at that time? Were they doing the best with what they had at that time. And that's where that judgment is.
One of the things that the New Church teaches is that really the root of evil is a selfish desire to control other things and people. Jesus teaches us to love your neighbor as yourself, and for me to love my neighbor is to allow my neighbor to hold a different point of view. I might disagree with it. I can still actively work to champion the thing that I believe in and to, have a dialogue about why I believe what I do. But that part of me that wants to control, to make them go away, to make them shut up, that's coming from a place of evil in my life. And so I can learn to recognize that. I can learn to put that aside and instead embrace a more loving approach. But that takes a lot of time to start to observe those things and to start to really understand what is evil and what is good and how I can separate them from each other.
So, what do you think? Comment below and let us know. A like or subscribe would go a long way too. If you're interested in discussing spirituality more personally, check out grandhumanproject.org to find a small group that's right for you. Or visit newchurch.org, where you can find church locations, news, resources, and much more. Thanks for watching, and God bless.